Hello, I'm Ariane. My family made up a lie to keep me from attending Thanksgiving, but I was the only one left out. But worse than the lie was the betrayal that had been festering for years. They didn't just keep me out, they secretly drained my inheritance, sold my house, and then Dad sneered, "Pay rent or sleep outside." Hook 2. The way they've treated me, the insults, the manipulations, they crossed a line. But when Dad made his final threat, I knew it was time to make my move. What happened next left them speechless, and I haven't looked back since. Combined Hook. Hello, I'm Ariane. My family lied to keep me out of Thanksgiving, but that was just the beginning. They drained my inheritance, sold my house, and then Dad sneered, "Pay rent or sleep outside." But that's when I finally snapped. What I did next left them silent, and they'll never forget it. It was a cold evening in suburban Chicago. The house was warm, but there was a strange, suffocating tension in the air. It wasn't the warmth of the oven or the bustling energy of a family coming together to celebrate. No, it was the kind of warmth that didn't reach the heart. The holiday dinner had become a formality, a ritual where grudges were silently carried through every course. I sat at the head of the table, glancing around at my family. My father, Desmond, sat at the far end of the room, his presence demanding silence without a word. He was a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command the room. I'd learned that from a young age. My mother, Constance, sat beside him, her posture perfect, her smile too tight. She was already preparing her sharp words, the kind that cut without leaving a mark, or so she thought. Dinner had begun quietly, each of us pretending that everything was fine. I pushed my food around on my plate, trying to make it look like I was participating in the conversation, but the undercurrent of judgment, of subtle barbs disguised as concern, made it impossible to ignore. My younger siblings, already married, successful, and with families of their own, were discussing their latest achievements, the new cars, the vacations, the houses. I felt like an outsider in my own family. It wasn't the first time, but it stung all the same. The conversation shifted. I could feel my father's eyes on me. A silence hung between us, a thick, expectant pause. My stomach twisted, and I could feel the heat of anger bubbling under my skin, but I stayed quiet, knowing what was coming. Desmond finally spoke, his voice calm, authoritative, as if nothing could shake him. "Starting next month, you'll pay rent or sleep outside." His words hit me like a slap in the face. The room fell silent, the clinking of silverware halting in midair. The nerve. My heart raced. My thoughts stuttered. Rent? What the hell? I couldn't even process it. Was this really happening? I glanced at my mother, expecting to see her attempt to soften the blow, but she didn't even flinch. Instead, she looked at me with the same dismissive expression she had always had when it came to me, as though I were a disappointment. "Maybe it'll teach you some respect," she added, her voice dripping with condescension. I didn't respond right away, the weight of their words pressing down on me. They had always treated me like the black sheep, the one who didn't measure up, who wasn't successful enough, who hadn't figured out life like my siblings had. But this was different. This was an outright rejection. I had always been the youngest, the one who was overlooked, the one whose achievements were either ignored or downplayed. But I'd never felt like this before. It was as if I wasn't even worthy of a place at the table, at my own damn family's dinner. And then the anger started to creep in. It wasn't just the rent. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they had treated me my whole life, the way they had diminished me, made me feel small, as if I were nothing but a burden. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an inconvenience. I sat there for a moment, stunned, my hands trembling slightly, but I refused to let them see it. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of breaking down. I thought back to all the years of insults, of feeling lesser than my siblings. I was never as smart as Pedro, never as accomplished as my cousin, never as beautiful as the other girls they compared me to. It wasn't just the rent, it was the culmination of every slight, every comment, every snide remark that had built up over the years. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my thoughts. No, I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them push me around anymore. As the meal continued, my thoughts drifted back to my childhood. I remembered the way they had looked at me when I was a teenager, always questioning my choices, always telling me that I wasn't good enough. I had tried to be independent, tried to assert myself, but it was always met with disapproval. The first time I moved out, I thought it was going to be different, but the moment I got into trouble, they were right there, pulling me back into their control. I had never felt like I belonged, and now, this ultimatum, it felt like the final nail in the coffin. My parents had never treated me as an equal. They had always seen me as a project to fix, as someone who needed guidance, but never as an adult who could stand on her own 2 feet. And yet, here I was, at this dinner table, expected to pretend that everything was okay. But it wasn't. I wasn't okay. I was done. Done playing the game. Done being the one they belittled and controlled. I wasn't going to sit at this table anymore, pretending that I belonged. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The eyes of the family turned to me, but I didn't care. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I quietly walked to my room, not sparing another glance at the people who had made me feel like I wasn't enough. I packed my bags, each item a piece of my freedom, a symbol of my decision to finally take control. As I zipped up my suitcase, I thought to myself, this isn't about the money. It's about respect. It's about control. They wanted to keep me small, to keep me their child forever. Well, I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and didn't look back. The next morning, my phone lit up with calls and messages from my mother. I didn't respond. I didn't want to hear it. They would never understand. They'd never see me as their equal, and frankly, I didn't need them to. I started the car and drove away, the weight lifting off my chest as I left that house behind. But there was a sting, a guilt that crept in, even though I knew this was the right thing to do. Would they miss me? Would they ever realize how much they'd hurt me? My phone rang again. It was from my father. Desmond. I answered it, already knowing what he would say. Where is your stuff? Why isn't your room filled? I'm done being dead weight. Consider me gone, I said, my voice calm, almost cold. His response was the same old controlling tone. You're making a mistake, Ariane. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. The sound of his voice echoed in my mind, but it didn't have the power it once did. I woke up with a start, the soft light of morning filtering through a window I hadn't noticed last night. The air was still, too still. My eyes scanned the unfamiliar room, the reality of my decisions sinking in like cold water. The bed I slept in wasn't mine. The blanket wasn't my favorite old one, the one my mom gave me when I was a teenager, full of faded stars and memories. No, this was different. This was Elena's guest room. I reached for my phone, groggy and disoriented. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications. I had dozens of missed calls and unread texts from my mother, Constance. Her words were sharp, even through the cold glass of the screen. So this is what you call being mature? The messages swung between guilt-tripping and passive-aggressive jabs, each one somehow colder than the last. My father's message was shorter, but no less cutting. If you leave, don't come back. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my brain. Don't come back. The echo of it reverberated through my skull. I had always felt like an outsider, like my presence was a burden. But now, it was official. I was no longer welcome in my own home. The silence in the room felt suffocating. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling. The weight of my decision hit me like a ton of bricks. But this time, there was no turning back. I had left, and in doing so, I had broken something inside me. I wasn't sure what to feel. Guilt? Sure, that was there. But anger. Anger burned hot beneath the surface. Anger at myself for staying for so long. Anger at them for pushing me to this point. The guilt was there too, but it wasn't enough to make me pick up the phone, to call them and apologize. No, I wasn't going to apologize for taking control of my life. Not anymore. But the silence of my phone screamed at me. It was a constant reminder that I had chosen this path, and that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Had I made the right choice? Had I done enough? Would they ever see me as an equal, or would I always be the problem child, the one they never understood? I pushed the thoughts aside, trying to focus on the emptiness around me. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep running from my family's expectations. Not forever. So, I started scrolling through my phone. I had no intention of responding. I had to hold strong. But as the minutes ticked by, I found myself reading Pedro's voicemail. His voice was the same as always, calm, collected, a touch of concern, but it still carried that weight of judgment. "You're hurting Mom, you know?" I could almost hear his eyes rolling. He didn't get it. None of them did. This wasn't about hurting anyone. This was about survival. They'd never ask how I was doing. They never asked if I was happy. They never asked if I was okay. No. They only cared if I was serving their idea of who I should be. The role I had been given was to be the one who was always there, always forgiving, always doing for others, never asking for anything in return, always quiet. That was their game, and I was done playing. I grabbed a notebook from the desk beside me, the pages blank, waiting. It had been a long time since I'd written anything down, but there was something cathartic about this, getting all my thoughts out, organizing the chaos in my mind. It felt like reclaiming a piece of me I'd lost a long time ago. I started writing, the words flowing faster than I could control them. I wrote about the silence, about how it had always been a part of my life, this quiet presence that smothered my every move. How my family had never truly listened to me. Not really. And in the middle of it all, I remembered my father's words years ago when he'd made a comment that I couldn't shake. "No one likes a woman who tries too hard." Those words had cut deep. They still did. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't going to hide in the shadows, just waiting to be accepted. I was done waiting for approval. I paused, the pen hovering over the paper. I looked back at the message from my father, the one that had cut through me like a knife. His words echoed in my mind. "Don't come back." I hadn't realized it before, but leaving wasn't just about escaping them. It was about escaping the pattern they had woven around me for my entire life. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally being right for myself. I wrote one last line in the journal. "Sometimes you're not breaking the family. You're breaking the pattern." I closed the notebook, knowing that no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much I wanted to pick up the phone and beg for their love, I couldn't go back. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. The next few hours were a blur of emotions. I spent time scrolling through job listings and calculating my savings. I wasn't anywhere near being financially stable, but I couldn't afford to go back. Not now, not after everything. Elena had offered me a place to stay temporarily, but I didn't want to rely on her. I couldn't. She had her own life, her own struggles, and I wasn't about to burden her with mine. I thought back to the first time I had felt truly independent, back when I moved out of the house, thinking I could finally make a life for myself. I had been so naive then, but at least I had tried. And then, Elena told me something that hit harder than I expected. She, too, had been cut off by her family. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was familiar. She understood in a way no one else could. "You're not alone in this, you know," she said. It was a simple statement, but it made me realize how much I needed to hear it. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had been rejected by their family. Maybe I wasn't the only one trying to piece together their life after being told they weren't enough. I wanted to believe that I wasn't the only one, but at the same time, I didn't want to need anyone. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, even if it meant doing it alone. The phone buzzed again, and I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the keyboard as I typed a message to my mother. I couldn't do it. I deleted the message before I could finish. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need to explain myself. Instead, I sent myself an email. I wrote to my younger self, reminding her that she didn't have to apologize for wanting more, that she didn't have to keep apologizing for existing, that she was enough, just as she was. When the message from Desmond came through, "Grow up," it didn't sting the way it used to. I just stared at it, the words losing their power over me. I sat back in the chair, feeling a sense of calm settle over me. I didn't have to fight for their approval. I wasn't broken. I wasn't wrong. I was free. And then the final message came through. "There's a family meeting next Sunday. You're expected to be there." I read it, my pulse steady, no apology, just expectation. I smiled slightly. This time, it was different. "Not this time," I whispered to myself. I didn't want to go back, not after everything. But the message still burned its way through my phone screen. "This Sunday, 3 p.m. Don't be late. We need to talk." My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, the weight of the words sitting heavy in my chest. I could have ignored it, could have stayed silent, moved on with my life. But something in me was tired of hiding, tired of running. I thought about the years of manipulation, the emotional games my parents had played with me, and how I always ended up swallowing my pride. This time, though, I was different. I wasn't going to be a pawn anymore. I was going to face them head on. I needed closure, and I needed to do it on my terms. The decision wasn't easy, but it was clear. I would go. I would confront them. This meeting would either be the beginning of my freedom or the end of any hope I had left of ever finding peace in my family. It would be my test. The hours leading up to Sunday felt like a slow burn, each tick of the clock reminding me of how much was at stake. I had nothing to lose anymore. Nothing. I sat down at my small kitchen table, a notebook in front of me, pen in hand. I needed to prepare. I couldn't just show up and let them steamroll me like they always had. This time, I would make my voice heard. I started jotting down everything I could remember, the little insults, the comments that had worn me down, the moments when I was dismissed, belittled, ignored. My heart ached as I relived it, but I pushed through. I needed to remember. I needed to be strong. One by one, I wrote down the times they had twisted my words, used my vulnerability against me. I wrote about my father's cold words, his casual disregard for me, and how it had always felt like I was invisible. I wrote about my mother's condescending smiles, her constant comparisons to my siblings, and how it had always felt like I wasn't enough. "Don't let them gaslight you," Elena had told me the night before. "Don't let them twist your reality." I hadn't realized until then how much of my life had been spent questioning myself, second-guessing my worth. But not anymore. I was done. I packed a bag, throwing in a few things I'd need for the day: extra clothes, a toothbrush, and a notebook. I didn't know how long I'd be gone, but I wasn't coming back until I had answers. Elena was right. This was my turn to speak my truth, and I wasn't going to let them silence me. As the day wore on, I found myself in a haze of anticipation and anxiety. What if it went badly? What if they just turned it all around and made me feel small again? The doubts gnawed at me, but I pushed them aside. I had made it this far. I could face them. When the time came, I left Elena's apartment and drove to the family home. The street looked the same as it always did, familiar and yet foreign. I parked outside, the weight of what I was about to do settling heavily in my chest. I walked up the front steps, pausing for just a second before I knocked. There was no turning back now. Desmond opened the door. His face was unreadable, but there was a tension in his eyes. He stepped aside to let me in, and I could hear Constance's voice in the other room, soft but unmistakable. "You're late," she said without looking up. "I guess some things never change." I bit back the urge to retort. This wasn't about winning. This was about standing my ground. "Sit down," Desmond commanded, his voice sharp. I took a seat at the table, my hands folded neatly in my lap. The room was tense. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, but I refused to be cowed. I wasn't their child anymore. I was done being their scapegoat. Desmond wasted no time. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You owe us an apology." My stomach tightened. This wasn't the reunion I'd hoped for. This wasn't about understanding or resolution. This was just another attempt to make me feel guilty for choosing myself. "I'm not here to apologize," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm here because I need to be, but I won't apologize for being who I am." Constance's lips tightened into a thin line. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "I'm tired of being treated like a burden. I'm tired of carrying all the weight for this family, like I'm some sort of charity case. You've never respected me, and I've spent too many years pretending I didn't notice." The room fell silent. Desmond looked like he was about to speak, but I cut him off. "I'm not your punching bag anymore." I could see the shock in their eyes, the flicker of something they hadn't expected. This wasn't the obedient child they had always known. This was Sylvia, standing tall and refusing to bend. The air between us crackled with tension. Constance shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "You always think you know better, don't you? You think you can just walk away from this family like you don't need us." "No," I said, my voice cold. "I'm walking away because I finally realize I don't need you to be whole. I've spent my entire life trying to make you proud, trying to be what you wanted me to be, but not anymore." Pedro walked into the room just then, his face scrunched in confusion. "What's going on here? Why are you acting like this?" His voice held a mixture of concern and judgment. It was clear where his loyalties lay. He always had been their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He was their puppet, their perfect son, and for the first time, I resented him for it. "I'm done," I said, looking at Pedro, my voice steady. "I'm not here for your approval anymore. I'm not here to please anyone." Pedro's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Desmond spoke again, his tone venomous. "You think you're the one who's been wronged, but you have no idea what it's like to carry this family. We've done everything for you." "Stop!" I shot back, my frustration reaching a boiling point. "You don't get to guilt-trip me anymore. You never gave me anything but shame." Just as I thought the situation couldn't get worse, Desmond dropped the bombshell. "You owe us, Sylvia. You owe us for everything we've done for you. You're still on our books. I had to refinance the house, and guess what? You're still tied to it. Your name's on everything." My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The truth that had been hidden from me for so long. "You used my name?" I asked, my voice low but filled with disbelief. Desmond's face was unreadable, but the words came anyway. "You owe us, Ariane. Don't forget that." I was frozen, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. It was about making sure I would always be their child, always their responsibility. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I felt a rush of anger and betrayal that cut deeper than anything I had felt before. "This isn't over," I whispered under my breath, the words tasting like both a warning and a promise. The message arrived in the afternoon, a quiet notification that shook me to my core. It wasn't a text from my parents. It wasn't a call from my brother or any of the usual suspects. No, this time it came from a family lawyer, an unfamiliar name that I couldn't place, but the message itself was enough. "I regret to inform you that your name has been used in a contract, and we must discuss an urgent legal matter. Please contact us immediately." My heart dropped. I had just walked away from everything, had taken the first steps to break free. And yet, here it was. My name, once again, dragged into the chaos of my family's schemes. I had thought I'd reached the limit. I thought things couldn't get worse, but now I was wrong. The lawyer's words weren't just a warning. This wasn't just about broken promises or empty threats. This was a betrayal, something deeper than any of their past manipulations. My name, my identity, had been used without my knowledge or consent in a legal contract. For what? A loan? A business deal? I couldn't even fathom the details yet. I felt the heat of anger rising in my chest. My parents, especially my father Desmond, had promised me everything was fine. He'd told me there was no need to worry. But now, the truth was laid bare, and I realized how deep the lies had gone. They hadn't been concerned for me. They'd just been using me all along. I stared at the phone in my hand, the lawyer's number still on the screen. For a moment, I was frozen. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to face this? And then, with a deep breath, I made the call. I dialed the number and waited as the phone rang. The voice on the other end was polite but firm, explaining the situation. My name had been added to a financial agreement, and the loan had already been processed. "What do you mean they used my name?" I asked, the words thick in my throat. "How could they do that?" The lawyer paused. "Without your consent, without your knowledge, it's a serious matter. We'll need to discuss the next steps." I could feel the ground slipping beneath me. How could they do this? How could they betray me like this? I hung up the phone, feeling like a fool. They hadn't just manipulated me emotionally. They had gone one step further. They had financially entangled me in their mess. My mind raced. This wasn't just about guilt trips or passive-aggressive comments. This was real, tangible damage. And it was my name that had been used to clean up their mess. But as the anger swelled, something else stirred in me too. Determination. No more. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I wasn't going to sit back and let them control me, not like this. I thought back to that last conversation with Desmond. He had said everything was fine, that there was nothing to worry about. But all along, he'd been using me. I stared at the phone again, my thoughts turning dark. This wasn't just a family issue anymore. This was a fight for my future, for my independence. No more silence. No more letting them pull the strings. I wasn't going to let them bury me under their lies. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking deep breaths. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to expose them for who they really were. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to walk in unprepared. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be a showdown. I took the day off work. I needed to get everything in order, gather the evidence, understand what I was up against. I met with a financial advisor who went through everything with me, explaining the full scope of the legal mess. It was worse than I had feared. Not only had they used my name, But they had done it to secure a business deal without telling me anything. I felt the weight of it all crashing down. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had used me. They hadn't just taken my trust, they had taken my future. I went back to Elena's apartment afterward. She could see it in my face. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low. "They used my name in a business deal. They took out a loan without telling me. I'm tied to it now." Elena shook her head, looking at me with sympathy. "You're kidding." "No. They didn't even ask. They just did it. They think they can keep doing this, like I'm their backup plan, their safety net." Elena looked at me, the same fierce determination in her eyes. "You can't let them get away with this. You have to stand up for yourself. You've got nothing to lose now." I nodded, feeling the anger and frustration start to churn inside me. I won't let them silence me. I won't back down. Well, I'm going to confront them. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was ready. I had all my evidence, messages, the loan documents, everything. I was prepared to lay it all out. When I arrived at the family home, the tension was palpable. Desmond and Constance sat at the kitchen table, the same cold, disapproving look on their faces. Pedro wasn't there, which gave me some small comfort. At least he wouldn't be there to side with them this time. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I just went straight into it. "I know about the contract," I said, my voice steady. "I know you've been using my name for your business deal. You never asked me. You never told me." Desmond's face tightened, but he didn't speak at first. Constance, however, was quick to defend him. "You don't understand, Sylvia. This is for the family," she said, her voice dripping with passive aggression. "We're trying to make things work." "No," I said, my voice sharp. "You're trying to use me. You've been using me for years, emotionally and now financially." Desmond stood up, his face red with anger. "You don't know what we've been through. You don't understand the sacrifices we've made." I shook my head, feeling the sting of betrayal more than ever. "No more. I'm not your backup plan. I'm done being your safety net." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and then, as if to add salt to the wound, Desmond dropped the bomb. "You owe us, Sylvia. You owe us everything." I couldn't believe it. They had manipulated me for so long, and now they were acting like I was the one who owed them something. I stood up, my legs steady beneath me. "No, you don't get to use me anymore." I walked out of the house, the weight of the betrayal heavy on my shoulders, but also, for the first time, a sense of clarity. This wasn't over, but I was done being their pawn. The days that followed the family meeting were a blur. A mix of quiet rage and disbelief simmered beneath the surface of my every thought. I had done it. I had finally stood up for myself. But there was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory, only the heavy weight of knowing things had changed forever, and the truth of what that meant was beginning to sink in. The betrayal wasn't just a financial hit. It was personal. It always had been. My parents had used my name for their gain. Desmond, with his cold, calculating nature. Constance, pretending to be concerned while subtly twisting the knife deeper. All these years, I had been their emotional sponge, their scapegoat, their fallback plan. No more. I sat in the small apartment I'd rented out for the time being, the walls feeling more and more like a cage. The silence was deafening. The weight of everything was suffocating. I couldn't turn back, not now. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was my only option. I had to fight back. I had to win, for my own sanity and peace of mind. No more being their puppet. The text from Desmond earlier that week still lingered in my mind. "You're making a mistake, Ariane. You'll regret this." I had thought about answering, telling him exactly what he could do with his manipulation and threats, but I didn't. I couldn't. What would it accomplish? Nothing except more of the same cycle of guilt, fear, and powerlessness. No, this time would be different. I knew the confrontation was coming. There was no avoiding it. I could feel the tension building in my gut. It was only a matter of time before they would try to force me to back down, to come crawling back to them like I had so many times before. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the scared little girl begging for approval. It took everything in me to make that decision. To finally accept the fact that I wasn't going to get their approval. I wasn't going to get their love. Not the way I wanted it. Not the way I had always hoped for. But I was going to get something better. My freedom. I took the entire day off from work to prepare. The last thing I wanted was to walk into that confrontation unprepared. I needed to know exactly what I was going to say, how I was going to say it. I needed to be sharp, focused, and calm. There was no room for mistakes. I called a trusted friend, someone who had been through similar struggles with their own family. She was one of the few people who knew the depth of what I had been dealing with. "You don't have to fight fire with fire," she told me, her voice calm and soothing. "But you also don't have to let them burn you down either." Her words stuck with me. They were simple, but profound. She was right. I didn't have to engage in their games. I just had to be firm, clear, and unshakable. I spent hours that day reflecting on everything that had led me to this point. I thought about my childhood, the way my parents had always belittled me, dismissed me, and controlled every aspect of my life. They had always pretended to help, but in reality, it was all about keeping me small, keeping me dependent on them. I found a quiet corner in my apartment, away from the distractions, and started writing down my thoughts. I needed to be prepared. I needed to understand why I was doing this and what I wanted to say. "I am not your safety net," I wrote. "I am not your burden anymore. I will not be controlled, not now, not ever again." It felt cathartic, like I was finally taking ownership of my story. After I finished writing, I took a moment to close my eyes, let everything settle. I focused on the deep, calming breaths. I had to stay centered. The upcoming confrontation wasn't just a battle for money or family. This was a battle for my dignity. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was ready. Ready to face them, ready to stand my ground. The anger I had been carrying for years was like a fire inside of me, but I was determined to control it. This wasn't about attacking them. It was about defending myself. I drove to their house, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind rehearsing the words I had written down over and over. When I pulled into the driveway, the familiar house loomed in front of me, a place that once felt like home, but now felt like a prison. The thought of walking through that front door made my stomach turn, but I knew I had to do it. I walked in, and the silence hit me first. Desmond was in his usual spot by the fireplace, sitting in his chair like some patriarchal figure. Constance was pacing around the kitchen, as always, pretending to be busy, but her eyes followed me the moment I entered. Desmond's voice was cool as always. "You're here. Finally decided to face the music, huh?" I didn't flinch. I took a breath and said, "I know about the contract, the loan, the fact that you've been using my name without my consent." For a second, Desmond's face faltered. He quickly regained his composure, though trying to downplay the severity of it. "It was just business. Nothing personal." I shook my head. "It's personal now, Desmond. You didn't ask me. You didn't tell me. You just did it. And I'm done." I could feel the weight of those words in the air. Constance tried to interrupt, her voice filled with that familiar passive-aggressive tone. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Sylvia. We were just trying to help. You should be grateful for everything we've done for you." "Grateful?" I asked, my voice rising. "You've used me. My name. You've been using me for years. Don't sit there and act like this is about help. This is about control." Desmond stood up, his face red with anger now. "You don't understand. This is how things work, Sylvia. We've sacrificed everything for you. I stepped forward, cutting him off. No, you don't get to manipulate me anymore. I'm done being your backup plan. I'm done being your safety net. For a brief moment, Desmond was speechless. Constance, however, tried to shift the blame back onto me. This is how you repay us? After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I repeated, my voice steady but firm. You've never done anything for me. You've always done everything for yourselves. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the power shift in the room, just slightly, but it was enough. I was done being their victim. I had finally taken control. But then, just as I thought I had made my point, Desmond dropped the final bombshell. You owe us, Sylvia, he said, his voice low and menacing. You owe us everything. I stared at him, stunned. The betrayal I had felt in the past couldn't even compare to this. My name had been used without my consent, my life manipulated. And now they were trying to make me feel guilty about it. I stood tall, no longer the little girl who had tried to please them. No, I don't owe you anything, not anymore. As I turned to leave, Desmond tried to stop me, but I didn't look back. If I'm being dramatic, I said, turning around, then maybe it's time for you to see just how real this is. I couldn't stop replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Desmond's face, twisted with frustration and disbelief, had been burned into my memory. For years, I had lived under their control, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect pawn in their game. But that moment, the moment I stood up and fought back, had changed everything. It was as if I had awakened from a long, dark sleep, finally able to see the manipulation clearly for what it was. I had expected retaliation, but nothing had prepared me for how quickly Desmond would react. His attempts to brush off my accusations quickly crumbled under the weight of my words. He had always been able to maintain control, always able to twist the narrative and make me feel small. But now, I saw something in his eyes. Something that had never been there before. Panic. His usual smug confidence began to crack. He started trying to manipulate the situation in his favor, as though accusing me of betrayal would somehow make him the victim. You think I'm the bad guy? He had spat, the anger in his voice rising. You have no idea what I've been doing for you all these years, and this is how you repay me? I stayed calm, staring him down. Repay you? I asked, the words dripping with contempt. You don't get to use me anymore. You don't get to pull me into your mess. Desmond's response was a sputter of rage. You think you can walk away from this? You owe me. You always have. I didn't flinch. His words, once so sharp and controlling, now just felt empty. The power had shifted. It was no longer about his threats or his authority. It was about the truth. But I wasn't naive enough to think he'd let go that easily. I could see the gears turning in his mind, the desperation, the realization that his grip on me was slipping, and that's when he made the move I had been dreading. You'll regret this, he muttered, his voice low but full of venom. You have no idea what you're messing with. He was right about one thing. I had no idea what he was capable of. But that wasn't going to stop me. I had already made up my mind. This wasn't just about money or contracts anymore. It was about respect. It was about my dignity. And I wasn't going to let him take that away from me again. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calmness inside me. I had decided that if I was going to face this head-on, I needed to be prepared. I needed to be stronger than I had ever been before. I called Elena, my coworker, who had become my rock over the past few weeks. She had seen the toll my family had taken on me, and I knew she'd give me the support I needed. You can't let him win, Sylvia, she said, her voice steady on the other end of the line. You've come so far already. Don't go back now. I didn't need to be told twice. I knew I couldn't go back to being the same person I had been. That person was dead. I was ready to fight, not just for my freedom, but for the truth. I had to show them, show everyone, that I was no longer their pawn. I took the day off work and spent hours in my apartment, pacing back and forth, rehearsing everything I was going to say. I wrote it down in my journal, reading over it again and again, making sure every word was right. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. This had to be final. By the time I walked into Desmond's office that afternoon, I could feel the weight of the confrontation bearing down on me. I knew this was the turning point. This was where everything would change, one way or another. The office, usually filled with the air of authority, was cold and tense. Desmond sat at his desk, his face etched with frustration. His eyes flicked up when I entered, and for a moment he seemed unsure of how to react. The usual air of superiority was gone. His mask was slipping. "I know what you've done," I said, my voice steady. "I know about the contract, and I know you've been using my name without my consent. You've manipulated me, and I'm done." For a moment, Desmond sat in stunned silence. Then he shook his head, as if trying to make sense of it. "You don't understand," he started, his voice defensive. "This is business. It was all meant to help you, to help us." But I wasn't buying it anymore. "Help us?" I scoffed. "You've been using me to prop up your failures, Desmond. You don't care about me. You care about controlling me." He tried to defend himself, launching into a tirade about how it was all for my benefit, about how he had always done what was best for me. But his words were hollow. He couldn't deny it anymore. I had seen the truth, and I wasn't going to back down. I stood tall, refusing to let him control the narrative. "No more excuses," I said, my voice sharp. "I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not your safety net. I'm done being your punching bag." The air in the room grew thick with tension. Desmond's face twisted into a mask of disbelief and anger, but I could see the cracks. The facade was falling apart. And that's when he made his final play. "You think you can just walk away from everything?" Desmond growled, leaning forward in his chair. "You owe me, Sylvia. You've always owed me. You always will." I felt the fury rising inside me, but I didn't let it overtake me. I was calm, focused. I wasn't going to let him control me any longer. "You don't get to make me feel guilty anymore," I said, each word deliberate. "Not now. Not ever again." Desmond's face turned pale as the realization set in. The control he had over me was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He opened his mouth to speak, to try and manipulate me one last time, but I didn't let him finish. "I'm done," I said, turning toward the door. And this time, there's no going back. Desmond's attempts to regain control had been predictable, but this time, he wasn't going to get away with it. I had already seen the cracks in his mask. The fear, the panic in his eyes, they weren't something he could hide anymore. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't backing down. That morning, I received a call from one of Desmond's business associates. The message was clear. Desmond was trying to rally the family against me, using every tactic he could think of to make me back off. Financial leverage, emotional manipulation, whatever he could use to remind me of the debt I owed him. The words were cold, calculating. "You don't want to lose everything, Sylvia. Think about what you're doing." I wasn't moved. Desmond's threats had no power over me anymore. He had already shown me his true nature, manipulative, aggressive, and cold. The family that once meant so much to me had now become nothing more than a toxic force, trying to drag me back into the pit. I wasn't going to be part of his game any longer. In the face of his threats, I stayed calm. I didn't react emotionally. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I gathered everything I could, piece by piece, legal documents, financial records, everything I needed to prove his manipulation. I knew I had the upper hand, and this time, I wasn't going to let it slip. By mid-afternoon, I was ready. I stood in front of the mirror, breathing in deeply, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. My heart was steady, my mind clear. For so long, I had been the obedient daughter, the one who always played by the rules. But not today. Today, I was going to stand up for myself, for my own life. I had spent years questioning my worth, all those years of trying to earn my family's approval, only to have them use me as a pawn in their games. But that ended now. This wasn't just about Desmond or the family business. It was about me taking control of my life and my future. Elena had given me the strength to do this. "You're stronger than you think," she'd told me earlier. "Don't let them win. Not this time." Her words echoed in my mind as I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, heading for the final confrontation. Desmond was waiting for me in his study, sitting behind his massive desk, trying to maintain the illusion of control. As soon as I walked in, he looked up with that familiar smug expression, but it faltered when he saw my face. I didn't waste any time. "I know about the contract, Desmond, the one you signed with my name on it. You've been using me, and I'm done letting you get away with it." His expression shifted from smug to defensive. "This is business, Sylvia," he said, trying to brush it off. "You don't understand. This is for the family's future. You'll thank me one day." I didn't let him finish. "For the family's future?" I repeated. "Or for your own?" "You've been using me as your backup plan, as your insurance policy, but I'm not that anymore. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your tool." Desmond shifted in his chair, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for something to say, some way to control the situation. But the truth was out, and nothing he could say would change that. "You think I don't know what's been going on?" I pressed, stepping closer to his desk. "You thought I'd just let you walk all over me? You thought I'd be your victim forever?" His jaw clenched, and I could see the anger rising in him. But there was something else behind his eyes now. Fear. Fear that for the first time in years, he wasn't in control. I placed the legal documents on his desk, watching as his face drained of color. These were the things he had hoped would never see the light of day. Proof of his financial mismanagement, his lies, the manipulation he had subjected me to. I waited, letting him take it in. For the first time, I saw him falter. He was cornered, unable to fight back with his usual tactics. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "Not this time." Desmond slammed his fist on the desk, his eyes wild with panic. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" he shouted. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't just about the money, Sylvia. This is about control. You'll regret this." I stood tall, not backing down. "No, Desmond. I won't regret it. You're the one who's going to regret this. You're the one who's going to lose everything." His face turned red with rage, but he knew I had the upper hand. There was nothing left for him to say. The power shift was palpable. Desmond's empire, the one he had built on manipulation, fear, and control, was crumbling, and I was the one who had brought it down. I looked at him, standing there, a broken man. The man who had spent my entire life making me feel small, making me feel like I owed him something. And now, I was the one who had taken back my power. "I'm done," I said, turning to walk away. "And I'm never coming back." But as I reached for the door, I heard his voice one last time. "You'll regret this, Sylvia. You're making a mistake." I didn't even turn around. I knew what I had to do. I was finally free. Just as I stepped out of the room, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, only to find a message from an unknown number. "It's not over." The weight of those words hit me like a ton of bricks. Desmond may have lost this battle, but the war was far from over. I stepped into the family home with a resolve stronger than any I'd felt before. This wasn't just another confrontation. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Every decision I'd made, every step I'd taken, had led me to this moment. The time for silence, for avoidance, was over. It was time to stand my ground, fully prepared for whatever Desmond might throw my way. I had everything I needed: documents, evidence, a clear plan. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. The legal files in my bag were a testament to everything he'd done. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal. It wasn't just a fight for money or power, it was a fight for my own life. But even as I walked through the door, Desmond's earlier threats echoed in my mind. "You'll regret this," he'd said. It was meant to scare me, to make me second-guess myself. But there was no turning back now. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to let him break me. I couldn't. Desmond was sitting in his usual chair, trying to maintain the same air of authority that had always worked on me, but this time, it was different. The tension was palpable. He knew it, I knew it. And for once, he was the one who was nervous. "You're really going to do this, Sylvia?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're going to destroy the family over this?" I didn't respond right away. I just let the silence stretch between us. It was his game to manipulate. I had spent years letting him control me, playing the part of the dutiful daughter who could never say no. But today was different. Today, I was no longer his pawn. "I'm not destroying the family, Desmond," I finally said. "You did that. You've been using me for years, manipulating me, and now I'm done." His eyes darkened, and his posture shifted. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he growled, trying to maintain control. "You think you're some big hero, but you're just a foolish girl who doesn't know what she's up against." I stood firm. "I know exactly what I'm up against. I have everything right here." I placed the documents on the table between us, the ones that proved his manipulation, the ones that would bring everything crashing down. Desmond tried to spin his usual web of lies, his voice rising in anger as he accused me of misunderstanding the situation. He tried to deny everything, saying that I was the one causing all the problems, but I wasn't having it anymore. "You're the one who's been lying, Desmond," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You've been using me, using the family, and now you want to make me the villain? Not anymore." I watched his face change as he realized that the lies he'd relied on for so long were no longer working. His mask of control was slipping, and he knew it, but he wasn't going to give up easily. Desmond had always been a man who thought he could win by wearing people down, by getting them to submit, but I wasn't submitting anymore. "You have no power left here," I told him, pushing the final piece of evidence across the table. "It's over." Desmond's face turned red as he realized the full extent of his failure. His empire, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His eyes flared with panic as he searched for a way out, but there was no escape now. "I'm not going to let you do this," he hissed, his voice shaking with fury. "You'll regret this, Sylvia. You'll regret turning your back on your family." I stared him down, unflinching. "Your game is over, Desmond," I said, cutting him off before he could say another word. For a moment, the room was silent. Desmond stood there, breathing heavily, trying to regain his composure, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. This wasn't a fight he was going to win. I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over me, the years of fear, of being controlled, of being silenced. It was all gone now. Desmond's empire of manipulation had finally come to an end, and I had torn it down with nothing more than my voice, my courage, and the truth. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I had fought for myself, for the person I wanted to be, and I had won. It wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. But even as I stood there, watching Desmond's world crumble, I knew this wasn't the end. The battle had been won, but the scars of the past were deep, and the future was uncertain. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. My heart sank as I read the words. "You'll regret this. The worst is yet to come." I stopped in my tracks. This wasn't over. But for the first time, I felt ready for whatever came next. Sylvia woke up that morning with a sense of calm she hadn't expected. Today would be the final day of reckoning. It wasn't just another battle. It was the culmination of everything she'd endured, all the pain, the sacrifices, and the endless emotional roller coaster that had led her to this moment. She knew this would decide the future of her family, but more importantly, it would decide her future. The weight of it all sat heavy on her chest, but there was also a quiet clarity. She took a moment to reflect on how far she'd come. The journey hadn't been easy, and the scars from her past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. She wasn't the same person who'd silently stood by for years, watching her life unfold at the hands of others. The evidence she held in her hands wasn't just paperwork, it was her shield and her sword. Every decision, every step she'd taken had brought her to this point. She'd fought for herself and for the truth, and that's what mattered now. And her allies were by her side, offering support and strength. It wasn't just about her anymore. This fight had become bigger than that. It was about exposing the truth, about reclaiming what was hers, and standing up against the years of manipulation. Whatever happened next, this would be the moment that changed everything. Sylvia took a deep breath, clutching the documents tightly in her hands. The steady rhythm of her heartbeat was the only sound in the room. As she stepped out, the door closed behind her, and she felt an unexpected sense of calm wash over her. It was time. The meeting place loomed ahead, and Sylvia could see Desmond waiting inside. His posture was rigid, and there was an arrogance in his stance, as though he still thought he held the upper hand. He still believed that he could control the situation, that he could manipulate his way out of this. But Sylvia wasn't the same person who had once cowered under his gaze. She walked in with purpose, every step more confident than the last. They sat down across from each other, the tension thick in the air. Desmond didn't speak at first, just watched her, probably waiting for her to fold, waiting for her to show any sign of weakness. Sylvia started speaking, her voice calm but unwavering. "I know everything, Desmond. I know what you've done. You've manipulated, you've lied, and you've hurt everyone who's trusted you." Desmond flinched slightly, but quickly recovered. He leaned back, trying to maintain control. "You're making a mistake, Sylvia. This is all just a misunderstanding. I've always had the family's best interests at heart." Sylvia's eyes narrowed. She wasn't falling for it. "That's exactly what you've been doing all along, isn't it? Using the family, using me, pretending to help while all along you've been working your own agenda." Desmond opened his mouth to argue, but she cut him off, placing the evidence in front of him. The legal documents, the recordings, everything she'd gathered. Sylvia had been prepared for this. She wasn't going to let him spin his lies anymore. "I have everything right here," she said, her voice steady. "And now you have a choice. Face the consequences, or watch everything fall apart." Desmond's face paled as the weight of her words hit him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was cornered. Desmond's last-ditch efforts to manipulate the situation were pathetic. He tried to offer falsified documents, spread rumors, anything to discredit Sylvia. But it was too late. She was done being controlled. She wasn't swayed by his words. Instead, she calmly revealed the full extent of his betrayal, breaking down every lie, every manipulation he'd used to maintain control. The family, once divided, now began to see the truth. Sylvia's composed yet powerful delivery made sure of that. The walls Desmond had built around himself began to crumble. His arrogance, the way he'd always felt untouchable, it was all gone. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. Sylvia stood tall as Desmond sank lower into his chair. For the first time, he was the one trapped. The empire he'd built on lies had finally fallen apart, and as she turned to walk away, she knew this victory wasn't just for her. It was for everyone he'd hurt along the way. As Sylvia walked out, the weight of the victory was bittersweet. She had taken down the man who had controlled her for so long, but the emotional scars still lingered. The battle had been won, but the healing would take time. She had to process everything, the lies, the manipulation, and the toll it had taken on her. But as she walked away from the ruins of her past, there was a sense of relief, of quiet triumph. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was free. She reached out to others who had been hurt by Desmond's actions, offering them the same compassion and support that had helped her through the darkest times. They would rebuild together, piece by piece. The scars remained, but they no longer defined her. She understood now that her strength wasn't in what she had overcome, it was in who she had become. Sylvia paused, looking toward the future. She wasn't sure what came next, but she knew this battle was over, and a new chapter, one where she was in control of her own destiny, was just beginning. Then, as she stepped forward, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. The worst is yet to come." Sylvia looked at the message, her heart momentarily stopping. But she didn't let it shake her. She had won. And whatever came next, she was ready.